So hey guys, welcome again to my vlog. So for today we discuss the chapter 8 summary. So the chapter 8 summary is the subnetting IP networks. So designing, implementing and managing an effective IP addressing plan ensure that networks can operate effectively and efficiently. This is especially true as the number of host connections to a network increases. Understanding and hierarchical structure of the IP address and how to modify the hierarchy in order to more efficiently meet routing requirements is an important of the planning of an IP addressing scheme. In the original IPv4 address, there are two levels of hierarchy, a network and a host. These two levels of addressing allow for basic network groupings that facilitate in routing packets to a destination network. A router forwards packet based on the network portion of an IP address. When the network is located, the host portion is the address allows for identification of the destination device. In an Ethernet LAN, devices use broadcast to locate other devices, services. Other devices, a device use address resolution protocol or ARP, which sends layer to broadcast to a non-IPv4 address on the local network to discover the associated MAC address. Services. A host typically acquires its IPv4 address configuration using the Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol or DHCP, which sends broadcast on the local network to locate a DHCP server. Switches propagate broadcast out of all interfaces except the interface on the with it was for example, if a switch in the figure were to receive a broadcast, it would forward it to the other switches and other users connected in the network. Reason for subnetting. Subnetting reduces overall network traffic and improves network performance. It also enables an administrator to implement security policies such as which subnet are allowed or not allowed to communicate together. There are various ways to using subnet to help manage network devices. Network administrators can group devices and services into subnet that are determined by locations such as floor in a building, organizational unit, device type, any other division that makes sense for the network. Octet boundaries. Every interface on a router is connected to a network. The IPv4 address and subnet mask configured on the router interface are used to identify the specific broadcast domain. Recall that the prefix length and the subnet mask are different ways of identifying the network portion of an address. IPv4 subnet are created by using one or more of the host bits as network bits. This is done by extending the subnet mask to borrow some of the bits from the host portion of the address to create additional network bits. The more host bits that are borrowed, that are subnet that can be defined. Classless subnetting. For instance, a -24 network address is commonly subnetted using longer prefix lengths. By borrowing bits from the port octet, this provides the administrator with additional flexibility when assigning network addresses to a smaller number of end devices. As shown in the figure, this is the by borrowing per bits and the subnets and host each, as you can see. Calculating the host. To calculate the number host each subnet can support examine the third and fourth octet. After borrowing 7 bits for the subnet, there is 1 host bits remaining in the third octet and 8 host bits remaining in the fourth octet for a total of 9 bits that were not borrowed. Creating 1000 subnets with -8 network. Some organizations, such as small service provider or large enterprises, may need even more subnet take or all. For example, a small ICP that requires 1,000 subnet for its clients. Each clients will need plenty of space in the host portion to create their own subnets. The network address or 10.0.0.0.0 as a default subnet mask of 255.0.0.0 or -8. This means there are 8 bits in the network portion and 24 host bits available to borrow toward subnetting. Therefore, the ICP will subnet the 10.0.0.0-8 network. As always, in order to create subnet, we must borrow bits from the host portion in the IP address on the existing internetwork, starting from the left to the right with the first available host bit. We will borrow a single bit at a time until we reach the number of bits necessary to create 1,000 subnets. Subnetting based on the host requirements. There are two considerations when planning subnets: the number of host addresses required for each network, the number of individual subnets needed. The table in the figure displays the specifics for subnetting a -24 network. Notice how there is an inverse relationship between the number of the subnets and the number of hosts. The more bits borrowed to create subnets, the fewer host bits available is more host addresses are needed. More host bits are required, resulting in the fewer subnets. Subnetting based on a network requirements. Sometimes a certain number of subnet is required, with less emphasis on the number of host addresses per subnet. This may be the case in an organization chooses to separate their network traffic based on internal structure of department setup. As shown in the figure, for example, an organization may choose to put all host devices used to by employees in the engineering department in the network and all host devices used by management in a separate network. In the case, the number of subnet is most important in determining how many bits to borrow. Recall the number of subnets created when bits are borrowed can be calculated using the formula. The key is to balance the number of the subnet needed and the number of hosts required for the largest subnet. The more bits borrowed to create additional subnet means fewer hosts available per subnet. So, variable length subnet mask. With BLSM, the subnet mask will vary depending on how many bits have been borrowed for a particular subnet, thus the variable part of the BLSM. BLSM subnetting is similar to traditional subnetting in that bits are borrowed to create subnets. The formulas to calculate the number of hosts per subnet and the number of subnet created still apply. The difference is that subnetting is not a single pass activity. With BLSM, the network is first subnetted. The subnets are subnetted again. This process can be repeated multiple times to create subnet of various size. Note: when using BLSM, always begin the satisfying the host requirements of the largest subnet. Continue subnetting until the host requirements of the smallest subnet are satisfied. So, network address planning. Planning network subnet requires examination of both the needs of an organization network usage and how the subnets will be structured, performing a network requirements study in the starting point. The address plans includes determining the needs of each subnet in terms of size, how many hosts per subnet, how host addresses will be assigned, which hosts will be required static IPv for addresses, and which hosts can be used DHCP for obtaining their addressing informations. The size of the subnet involves planning the number of hosts that will require IPv4 host addresses in each subnet of the subdivided private network. For example, in a campus network design, you might consider how many hosts are needed in the administrative LAN, how many in the faculty LAN, and how many in the student LAN. In the home network, a consideration might be down and done by the number of hosts in the main house LAN and the number of the hosts in the home office LAN. So this is the um, remember the private IPv for address regions are, this is the ranges. So next, planning to address the network. The three primary consideration for planning address allocation are: the first is preventing the duplication of addresses, refers to the fact that each host is entire network must have a unique address. Without the proper planning and documentation, an address could be assigned to more than one host, resulting in access issues for both hosts. Providing and controlling access refers to the fact that some hosts such as server provides resources to internal hosts as well as internal hosts. The layer 3 address assigned to a server can be used to control access to that server. If, however, the address is randomly assigned and not well documented, controlling access is more difficult. Monitoring security and performance of the host means network traffic is examined for source IP address that are generating or receiving excessive packet. If there are proper planning and documentation of the network, addressing problematic network devices should be easily be found. So this is the planning to address network, the three consideration planning when the planning address allocations. Assigning address to device. The IPv6 global unicast address. The IPv6 subnetting requires a different approach than IPv4 subnetting. The same reason for subnetting IPv4 address space in the order to manage network traffic also apply to IPv6. However, due to the large number of IPv6 addresses, there is no longer the concern for conserving addresses. The IPv6 address plan can focus on the best hierarchical approach to manage and assign IPv6 subnets. Subnetting uses the subnet ID. The 16-bit subnet ID section of the IPv6 global unicast address can be used by organization to create internal subnets. The ID subnets provides more than enough subnets and host support that will ever be needed in the one subnets. For instance, the 16-bit section can create up to 65,536-64 subnets. This does not include the possibility of borrowing any bits of the interface ID of the address. Support up to 18 quintillion host IPv6 addresses per subnets. So that's all for the chapter 8. I hope you learned something from my blog. Thank you for watching and listening. So thank you and goodbye. Again, my name is Brian Giasi. Don't forget to subscribe.